Can everyone hear me? All right. I have a tendency to talk too fast because I'm a fake New Yorker. I lived there for 20 years and I got used to just talking quickly. So if I do start to go too fast, someone yell at me. I'm not going to mind. Thank you. All right. How is everybody today? How are our brains foggy? Yeah, okay. Okay, great. That's a perfect time for me to be here. Some context for the folks who don't know me. I'm not nearly as old as Mike or Brian. I think I'm younger than Brian. Or anyone who used to work at Sun who's in this room. But I have been, I know, I see you. I see all of you. Or Justin, wherever the hell he is. There's that sound. But I started programming when I was like 8 or 9, and I started programming full-time for money when I was 14. So despite my youth, I have been doing this for a while. My introduction to open source was FreeBSD in like 96-ish. And this talk is something about open source, but something about just software in general. 2 lifetimes ago, I worked as a developer writing code that went onto Solaris and IRIX boxes in biotech, which is weird. I did convolutional shit before we called it machine learning. Now I'm a VC, which is on the whole kind of odd, given my background and where I came from. So I'm far, far on the other side of the table. I am Donald Duck. I work at a small firm out of London called Crane Venture Partners. We invest in early stage companies, so that basically means from a couple of people and a prototype up through your first cohort of users or customers. On the whole, I specifically invest in what I call software infrastructure, not infrastructure software, because that's a different thing. And software infrastructure on the whole is open source. About half the companies in our portfolio actually are open source. The original title of this talk was The Problem with Money. And now it's The Problems with Money, because I kept coming up with new problems. And they're often really not about money, they're about people. So let us begin. I have no idea if I'm going to be on time, but I will try. I'll probably be a little fast. Can I get a show of hands? How many people here think they understand how venture capital works? That's actually a small show of hands. All right. Can I get a volunteer to get up and give me 2 sentences? One of you. Justin, get up and give me 2 sentences. I'm glad if Brian Cherney raised his hand that I didn't see his hand, because I wouldn't have called on him. Yeah. Yes. That's pretty good, actually. Yes, so Brian said, spend other people's money to buy lottery tickets and try really hard to spend that money on things that are not what other people spend that money on. That's actually pretty good. I will go a little further. This might be more than you want to know, but it's going to be useful context. By the way, in my speaker's notes, it said /me, ask for volunteers, which I did. Okay, some basics. There is some money sitting in a pot somewhere. That pot comes from your parents' pension plan, your kids' university's endowment, the largest mutual insurance company on the Eastern Seaboard, which I happen to know a lot about for some reason. The purpose of that money is to turn into additional money. And that additional money goes to fund pension plans. It goes to fund university endowments and programs. It goes to fund life insurance policies for generations. So, despite all the jokers who do this job, and there are a lot of jokers who do this job, it is actually a serious job. There are a lot of other pots of money too. Some of them are just like your local rich family. Some of them are a dubious sovereign wealth fund of a nation that has a bad record in human rights. If you take money from VCs, you should ask them where their money comes from. You might be surprised. A tiny, tiny sliver of these pots of money goes into venture capital. And by tiny sliver, I mean sub 5%, so 1 or 2 digits. Primarily because it's considered an alternative investment. Alternative as versus, by the way, I hope you don't get tired of this GIF because it's going to be here for a while. Alternative as opposed to like putting your money into an S&P ETF or like a treasury bill. The reason these people put pocket change into venture capital is because startups on the whole are extremely risky. They go to zero. Most of the stories you hear in the news are if they go to zero and there's a huge lawsuit and a crime, or if people become billionaires. But that's like 0.0001%, something like that. It is, I think, roughly 0.1%. Everything else effectively is okay, and okay is almost the same as going to zero from the perspective of the people who put money into the system. So if that's true, that means that the things that don't go to zero have to be huge. That's how you make up for the stuff that goes to zero. This is my favorite one. So the way these facts trickle down to someone like me, where it is my job, I am paid to make investments, I am paid to spend other people's money on lottery tickets, is that I need investments that generate a metric fuck ton of money. That's what this is. Ideally in the form of revenue and profits, but also in the form of another bigger company buying a startup I invest in for a metric fuck ton of money. Or in the form of a startup I invest in, IPOing, becoming a public company, which you might buy shares in, or someone buys shares in, or an ETF buys shares in for a metric fuck ton of money. My job is to return money to my investors, the pension funds, et cetera, and not just return the money they gave me, but return it in multiples, right? If I do my job correctly, the expectation is that for every dollar they give me, I give them back, if I'm on the low end, 2 or 3. If I'm on the high end, 10 plus. If I'm like in the top percentile of venture capitalists, I will give them back $100 for every dollar they give me, or more. That is the job. That's the job I'm supposed to do. So if I invest in 20 companies, my expectation is the vast majority of them are going to fail or go to zero. And 1, if I'm lucky, will do really well. That means, but for that to be true, what I need from the companies, what I need from the founders, which if you remember, I invest in software infrastructure, those founders are on the whole developers, and the software is on the whole open source. What I need from those founding teams and those products and that software is that it become huge, right? That they want to build a business and that everyone and everything involved really, 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 really wants and is driving towards a metric fuck ton of money. You might see the setup of a problem here. Okay. Developers on the whole are people who want to create things. They want to make things. They want to build things. In my experience, they just want to build the thing they want to build. This is going to be the start of a large number of sweeping generalizations, which means in any specific instance they might not apply. They might not apply to you. They might not apply to your friend. They certainly don't apply to many of the people in this room. That does not make them not true. On the whole, what developers don't want to do is to build a business. They don't want to market and sell a thing. They don't want to turn it into a product. They don't want to slap a price on it. They don't want to navigate community versus customers. They don't want to get SOC 2 and ISO 27001. I like the laughter. They don't want to become accountants. When you run a business, you have to become an accountant. You can't just have an accountant. You have to be an accountant. That is running a business. They don't want to care about margins. They do not want to operate a multi-tenant service. Operating a service is wildly different from creating a project that other people can run. It's wildly different. They definitely don't want to integrate with Active Directory, because that really is not fun. You got the picture. By the way, who knows who this man is? Tell me. Yes. Thank you. That's exciting. That made me really happy. I know this comes out as a surprise, but labor wants to be paid. We're going to stop so everyone can read the GIF. Thank you. When people work on something full-time, and developers are no exception, they do want to be paid. They want to be able to support themselves and their families. Maybe they want to build a team and support those folks and their families. They do not want to build a thing that the whole internet relies on, but no one wants to help maintain or pay for or support or even give thanks for. How many people get the joke on this GIF? You're old. If you have the source, what you're paying for is not the code. You're not paying for the functionality that the thing does. That's not where the value is, the thing that you give money for. Open source is not even a little a business model. It's orthogonal. Free as in speech, not beer. And also, as far as I know, there's no developer who wants to ship terrible things. Something that is crippled, only works for one person, only works on one core, only does half the thing that you actually want it to do, which is typically how you make it not be free. Trust falls. When you use something, you trust it. Users, and users in the broad sense, which includes customers, want to trust that the software they use does the thing it says it does, that it's maintained, that they can submit PRs if they want to, that they can compile it, that they're not second-class citizens to somebody else in the ecosystem. That they can submit bug reports and someone will respond eventually. That the project will still be there tomorrow, that the software will still be there tomorrow, that you, the person who made it, will still be there tomorrow. That they will not be rug pulled by a license change. You get the picture. This may come as a surprise to people in this room, because on the whole, I think it's not true of many people here, but users of every stripe, whether an individual hobbyist or an enterprise customer that spends millions of dollars a year on software, do not want to pay. They resist it, they fight against it, they push back on the very idea that labor should be paid. They certainly want to feed their families, but they absolutely do not want you to feed yours when they're occupying the role of consumer. Who knows who this guy is? Late night cartoons when you were younger? Yes, thank you. This should be self-evident, I believe, that corporate interests want power. I am not going to explain this. This may be less self-evident. Labor wants to be paid, remember. Corporate interests want power. So things that are foundations aren't funded, they're funded primarily by corporations, aren't funded without a bias to politics, competition, and power. The participants, committees, and people involved, no matter how hard they try, no matter how neutral they actually are caught up in a bias about competition, politics, and power. Funding is not free. Everyone does seem to want venture capital. For better or worse, what I do has become the default way to finance the creation of new businesses, of new software businesses, of new open source software businesses, of new software, of new stuff for some reason, which is baffling because it's a dumb way to finance a lot of things. But for better or worse, it's a default way, and it's what pretty much everyone reaches for. It is certainly seems to be what every developer reaches for when they want to build something. You want to open a chain of high-end vintage shoe stores? Venture capital. Want to start an esoteric trance hop music label? Venture capital. Want to build a tiny utility that does one thing that will never turn into an enormous business or a product or a platform. It just does one thing and you really want to do it? Venture capital. That's distinctly not the same as creating, operating, and scaling a technology-driven business with excellent margins that will turn $1 into $100. Sometimes you just want to solve a problem that has no business being a business, and that's okay. So, here's what we see happen in real life over and over like clockwork. You write some code to solve a problem that you have or have experienced or were commissioned to solve by your employer. And you look like this. You open source it, you get stars, downloads, PRs, a community builds. All the open source numbers go up, and you think you have the power. You want to do this, people like it, it could be a thing. The world tells you you're supposed to make a startup now. Everybody around you will tell you you're supposed to make a startup now. But no one tells you a startup is a business, or what a business even is, and you really, really do not know. You pitch venture capitalists. They sure as hell do not tell you all the things you're going to have to do the business part. They do give you money, though. You pay yourself, hire some friends, you've got a team now. You keep building the thing. It's so exciting. Open source numbers go up. By the way, apparently GitHub publishes a lot of GIFs on Giphy of this character, and I had no idea until yesterday. Then your VCs start to ask, how are you going to make money? You pick from a standard grab bag of stuff. We'll have a free tier. It's a freemium model. We'll do a SaaS hosted thingy, whatever. Same stuff. Everyone does the same stuff. It's quite boring these days. You drag your feet stubbornly at the very idea, actually, of doing that, of putting up paywalls, barriers, friction, gates, of asking for money. You're afraid of talking about money. You're afraid of asking for it. You feel uncomfortable, especially the first time you do it. You wish someone else would do it for you, so you hire people who are patently terrible to do things like sales and marketing, which are not terrible, but you really don't know how to hire people. You fire them, then repeat the same thing maybe another time or two before you might begin to get a hang of it, or you never get a hang of it. You start to make money. Yay. You raise more money from bigger venture capitalists. You start to feel successful. You hire more people, build more things, make more money. Things are going well, but your new friends, your new VCs, need you to make even more money, right? Because if the dollar I put in needs to turn into 100, and the dollar the next person puts in needs to turn into 100, and the dollar that the next person puts in needs to turn into 100, all of a sudden, instead of making $100, you got to make $300 each time. This whole pattern repeats fractally. Because the project and the product becomes successful, you have competitors. They've used your code, that's open source, to create their products and compete directly with you. They're making money, and depending on your emotional bent, they're making your money. You fight back. You change your license, you change the terms on your competitors, but you also change the term on your customers and your users. You damage trust. By the way, this same thing happens in closed source software too, just in a slightly different way. Some of your old users will fork your project. Some of your old users decide to build something that does what your thing does, but better from scratch, and they open source that thing, go to the beginning, repeat again. There are variations. Sometimes a company will open source something strategically. Other times, if your project is popular, VCs will hunt you down long before you go looking for money. I will do this. Many developers who want to be founders will open source something they're building just because they think it's what they're supposed to do, with essentially no thought given to why it should be open source or whether or not they even want to build a business. And no one, certainly not investors, absolutely not investors, seem to have any interest in having this conversation. Because we never know which of the 1,000 blooming flowers we put money into is going to turn into a rocket ship. So, I don't know why. Oh, it came back. So we are dissuaded from not having 1,000 flowers bloom. Amazing. I'm going to finish ahead of time. There is no moral to this story. I don't have any answers, but I can say with extreme confidence that none of these facts and none of these characters or what they want will change ever. I, of course, have a pet theory as to how we can alleviate some of this industrial idiocy, but it's an experiment in progress. Maybe I'll talk to you about it next year. I would like to take questions because I left out a shit ton of nuance. Steve, am I allowed to take questions? You got two questions. Someone yell at me. No one has a question. Oh, I guess it's all self-evident. Where? Yes.
The picture you're painting, do you believe this has been the case throughout the history of venture capital, or that this is a fairly recent cancerous innovation?
I think this is in the nature of the players involved. I think it is more recently feels worse in the sense that there are currently just shy of 3,000 early stage funds, seed through Series A in the US. There are 4,000 global. No mic again. And there are low thousands of later stage funds. The sheer number of money looking for money that thinks where it can make money in venture capital has gone up so much that there needs to be places for that money to go, and so it's an easy place to get funding, and that naturally drives more people to seek venture capital, blah, blah, blah. Like, so this thing is self-reinforcing on a loop currently. And also, even with the change in macroeconomic conditions, the number of funds does not go down over time, it goes up. If you look at the source of early stage funds, it's exploding. Yes?
So what if someone was listening to this and they're like, ooh, la la la, I love the money part, but I do remember a lot of things where it said I do some really stupid stuff. Do you recommend any resource, like a business class or something, for people to, I don't know, be less stupid?
So I actually really wish this was a thing. There is no such thing as a place you can go to get a baseline knowledge of how business works in real life, and business school certainly is not it. So no, unfortunately, I don't know. The only real recommendation I have is if you think you want to start a startup, go find people who have started startups, not people who are your age or your peer group doing it right now, but people who are a generation above you, and go and ask them for the truth privately, not in a public setting, and they might tell it to you. One more? Yeah.
So, can you imagine that people would found a company just to get the money from the VC? Just like run it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There is actually a phenomenon today, currently, that's frequently, effectively, people who what they want to do is run nonprofits And the way they're financing those nonprofits is by pitching a particular story to venture capitalists. And at that point, it's a venture capitalist job to not be hoodwinked. No. There are some laws and legalities involved. Okay, I gotta go. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.